Pour une fois, ça va être une interview en anglais. On va parler de décentralisation et d'interopérabilité. On a la chance d'avoir avec nous le CEO d'HyperLane, qui a une nouvelle solution, on va dire un nouveau protocole, qui vient faire concurrence à des protocoles que vous connaissez déjà, comme Layer 0 ou encore XLR, qui a comme offre de valeur, on va dire comme petit plus, de proposer justement la décentralisation, puisque cette fois, vous allez pouvoir taper directement dans leur documentation et implémenter sur votre blockchain leurs produits pour l'interopérabilité. À partir de maintenant, je vais passer en anglais. Il y aura les sous-titres automatiques normalement sur YouTube. Donc, vous devriez comprendre. John, how are you?
Very good, very good. I did my best to follow along. I heard some of the key words there.
In French, yeah.
Yeah, you know, my day-to-day French is all right. My crypto French, it's not as good as it could be, but this is a good learning opportunity.
Yeah.
So I'm doing great. I'm very excited to be here. This is our second time in front of a French audience, and we were recently at ETH Paris and had a great time. So it's awesome to have a chance to be close to this community once again.
Yeah. So you were with Sam from Journal du Coin?
Yeah. That was the first time, and then we actually came back to Paris as HyperLane. I'd been to Paris before for crypto, but never. That was before we started HyperLane.
Okay.
And just what a great time! What a great time! There's a much stronger community in France than anyone in America is aware of.
Yeah, that's what a lot of people say. I was talking with Monerium, and they told me like French community is big, but I think it's a mix of passion, because we have early Bitcoin investors, but also we have how to say big media, Journal du Coin, Cryptost. Now we have Asher as an influencer, Coin Academy, which is our media that exists since 2 years, but we have a lot of good media with a lot of resources for free. And people are very passionate about the subject. Yeah,
you really could feel that passion. I can tell you, so when we came to Paris, so for the summer, we were doing the ETH Global Hackathon, and it was, from our perspective, one of the best ones we've had. Very local, a lot of people from all over France, of course, all over Europe, but France was the dominant force, and just people coming to the booth and talking to us, like you could tell they're into this. And it was, for someone who like yourself has been in crypto, like I've been in crypto for 6 years now as my full-time job. It's, I'm as bullish and passionate as I've ever been, but it is always refreshing to just meet someone who was like, I just got in last year, I got in 2 years ago or 6 months ago, and they're really into it. And at Paris, It was like that, every hour someone would come by and with a similar story about how they got in and why they're interested. So,
a lot of students.
Pretty stoked.
A lot of students.
A ton, yeah.
So I will present you to the people. Hello YouTube. So you will have a time code in the description if you want to skip to the best moment. But we start with the introduction of Jon Kol. He's the CEO of HyperLane. Jon Kol, can you explain very quickly what is HyperLane? What do you propose in the crypto market?
Of course. So the easiest way I can explain what HyperLane is it's a permissionless interoperability layer. And what's important to take away from those words, like permissionless interoperability, what does it really mean? If you take one thing away from our conversation today, HyperLane is the thing that lets anyone, doesn't matter who they are, which team they work for, lets anyone connect any chain, right? You are interested, you have an app on Arbitrum, but you really want to have a pathway with a new Solana-based rollup, right? Like now there's talk about SVM-based rollups, and one is spinning up, but Arbitrum, Solana-based, like those things don't really cross over, but you want to do that. So you can take HyperLane. You don't have to talk to the HyperLane core team. You don't have to talk to any of the 5 companies that are building around HyperLane. You can just go ahead. You can use everything that was built around HyperLane. You could do that yourself. Now you can run a connection between that. And really what HyperLane lets anyone do is connect, anyone can put HyperLane on any chain. And then once that's done, anyone can use that to connect with any chain that has HyperLane on it. So you put HyperLane on your chain, you put it on my chain. Now we got connectivity, and totally permissionless in that way. And that is the simplest way I have to explain it. And that's really the important thing. We can get into the details of how it works. We can go into as deep as people want, but that's the short.
That's the base. Yeah. So I will ask you, John, to cut your screen sharing just to make sure you have a smoother connection, because I'm not sure your connection will stand
Oh,
for
no
the entire
problem.
interview. We will put the screen back later. It's just technical stuff.
Let me do
So
that.
to resume, I create a Qu'est chain, which is a fork of Ethereum. I can easily connect my chain to the entire HyperLane ecosystem.
Not only that, so people are accustomed to thinking, they usually think, oh, okay, so only EVM chains, right? Only Ethereum-based chains can talk to each other easily, because that's what normally what the interoperability protocols offer. Not with HyperLane. Because HyperLane is so open, all it needs, if you wanted to connect, say, a chain that looks like Solana, or a chain that's based in Move, you know, the language for
Yeah.
Aptos or Sweep, someone just needs to rewrite HyperLane in those languages. And I can't tell you exactly why. I think it's because of the open, you know, approach we've taken with HyperLane. We have now teams from all over the world that are putting HyperLane into as pretty much any language you can think of. So the work for Solana was just done. HyperLane's live on Solana.
Okay.
HyperLane was being built by a world-class team in Korea, alongside, as well as Strangelove. It's being built for different versions of Cosmos. It's being built for Move by the team at Movement Labs. It's being built for even as chains as like out there as Cardano. It's being built for chain like there's 5-6 other chains, you know, including one we're going to talk about today in Massa. And in all of these cases, there's a team that is saying, oh, wow, this thing is really cool. Its capabilities are really, really exciting. And it's so open and free. I'm going to implement this in my own native language so that I can now have connectivity with all these other chains that have HyperLane.
Okay. So as I said, I'm not a technical guy. So I will try to use stuff I know, and you will tell me yes, no.
Perfect.
For example, you have standard protocol like IBC for Cosmos, or something like XCM for Polkadot. What's the difference between these protocols and yours?
Very, very, very good question. So I'd say the concept, like if you just looked, you know, if someone wrote out the conceptual way of how HyperLane works and how IBC works, it's pretty close. It gets a little bit further away from how XCM works. But the key differences are, so IBC was built with things like tendermint, the main consensus that is being used in around Cosmos chains, with tendermint in mind.
Yeah.
But there are ways to augment it that don't really depend on tendermint. So wherever you have a tendermint chain, because if, you know, with IBC as it exists today, if you have a chain that has fast finality, meaning you get finality on your blocks fairly quickly, say within several seconds, and if you have the ability to cheaply do what's called light client verification, then IBC is great fit. And that's why it works very well within the Cosmos ecosystem for Cosmos chains, because all tendermint chains generally have these two properties. They have fast finality and they have light client verification, because the way that the channel in IBC, like an IBC channel, it's secured by recreating the consensus of each chain on the other one. And that's how you know, okay, this is why this is safe. And so this is really cool, because it means you don't have to trust anything other than the chains you're connecting. HyperLane, we wanted to take what the work was already existed with IBC and say, hey, this is amazing, but it's a little restrictive, right? Like most of crypto is not built with these tendermint chains. Most of crypto is built in the Ethereum way. Whether it's the right way or not, you know, is a lot of people disagree, and I might be one of them, that, you know, the EVM is not the most like efficient way to do things. Doesn't matter, it's the one that's being used. And so we wanted to take these same concepts but make it more extensive, more flexible. And so with HyperLane, we introduced this concept that we call modular security. So both IBC and HyperLane are permissionless, and IBC can also have different forms of security beyond what we just talked about, but some work needs to be done. With HyperLane, we just went that way from the start, where if I want to, like, if we want to connect between your chain and mine, we can now use anything in the world that we're comfortable with to secure that. And that could be as simple as, like, you run a node and you say, hey, I'm seeing these transactions on John chain, so I'm comfortable with them on my chain, to as complex as like a zero knowledge based light client, right? Something that uses zero knowledge proofs to prove what's happening on the other chain. So when you send something through HyperLane, on the receiving end, we have what we call interchain security modules. In HyperLane talk, we call them ISMs. I'll just talk about these security modules in our chat today. And the security module, again, it can be a wrapper on top of any type of logic, and this could be like a group of validators. It could be like one of these light client configurations. It could be as simple, again, as like you just run something on your own. You could have, like, a single key signing. It's really up to you as the receiver to define it. But once someone has created one of these, you could leverage it as well. And so that's the key difference, is that the in-between two chains, the things that secures that communication, is totally customizable. And I think the coolest part about that is that you could even make it different based on a single transaction. Like, so normally people are accustomed to the thing that is securing this channel, it's the same at all times. And so, like, hey, if I was going to send $100 or $100 million, goes through the same defense
security process. Yeah.
But, like, I don't know about you. When I go to the bank and I try to get, say, $100 out, they just want the PIN number, and I don't even need to talk to a person. But if I try to take out a larger amount, say $50,000, right, like most of what I have in the account, they're going to start asking me questions, and they're going to say, hey, give us your ID card. And they're going to ask, John, what's the address on the account? And what's the name of your of the company that deposits your salary? They're going to go through about 10 minutes of questions. They're going to try and see, can we verify that this person is the owner of the account? Because this is a large transaction. So what's the bank doing? The bank is doing a different security protocol based on what the user, is trying to do. And most people are kind of fine with it. It's annoying in the moment where you're like, hey, you know what? I don't want someone just walking in, pretending to be me, and being able to easily fool the banker. So with HyperLane, you can bring that same level of customizability. You can say, hey, someone is sending a low value transaction, say $100. No problem. That's a small amount. Let's just give it to them as fast as possible. Go through whatever is the fastest path. But hey, someone is trying to do something that is going to take a 9-figure transaction, or worse, they're going to drain the pools on my contract. Then why don't we treat that differently? Why should that get treated the same, right? Those are very different actions. And with HyperLane, you can do that because once something is sent, before it arrives at its ultimate destination, like as it arrives to the HyperLane contract on the destination chain, that's when you have these security checks that the developer themselves defines. And they say something like, oh, okay, wait a second. What's the user doing? Oh, okay, well, if they're doing this thing, it's really high value, send them through this path. Oh, they're doing this thing, that's really low value, that's fine, send them to the fast path. And that's kind of a, short of like how it's different from IBC.
So I have a question for you, because you talk about multiple amounts. Let's say instead of taking a 10K amount, I will do 100 transactions of $100. You have a trigger for that, for example?
Yep.
Yeah.
So really the cool thing is none of these things are set by HyperLane, the protocol itself. It's more so when you integrate HyperLane as a developer, you define both how you're going to send stuff, but also how you're going to receive it. And when you're thinking about how do I want to receive it, that's where you could put this additional logic, because it actually doesn't have to be based on the amounts of the transaction. It could just be based on like, what is the transaction doing, right? Is the transaction draining a pool? Is it adding to a pool? Is it trying to upgrade a contract? Is it trying to cast a governance vote? as the developer, you know your app better than anybody else. And so you know, wait a second, when someone is using this function, this is what it means. Here's how I want to treat this function. But certainly, like anytime when you offer customizability or like different forms of security, people are going to find, like, there are going to be ways to get around it. People are going to find some of those ways. So if someone, let's say, like, we were talking with an app just the other day, and they're very interested in like these different, you know, transaction limitations. And another question came like, hey, you know, yeah, what if instead I just send like, you know, 100 transactions of the smaller amount instead of like that big threshold? And like, you would left, like, depending, you know, if you write it in such a way where it doesn't account for that, then someone could do that. But here are some easy ways to get around that too. And I see the question in the chat.
Yeah.
Ram, so the question is the user or the developer who chooses the security of the transaction? So generally speaking, we expect it, and so far it's been the developer defining this on behalf of users. But some developers who use HyperLane may choose to expose that to the user. Although I'll tell you, in our experience so far, most developers have preferred not to, because they're afraid that this would be too much complexity for the user. And it's totally fine if there's complexity for the engineer, right? Like, they have a team, they're building this app, they're thinking about it. But the best apps, the ones we like the most, like Uniswap, just I click and I'm done, right? Like, you probably don't want to think too much about like, here to say, what do I know about this? I trust these people, I'm using their app, and we'll move on.
So Crypto GBL was asking too, are you a large team behind HyperLane right now?
Well, it feels large to me, but I guess it depends on how you think about it, right? So the core team, you know, at our company is only 13 people. I would say that feels large to us, but it's 13, like 1-3.
Yeah.
So not that large by but by this point, there are more than 5 companies that are working not with HyperLane, on HyperLane, the protocol. And so that is just really, really cool. Like, I couldn't have imagined, you know, we really only started kind of imagining this thing at the end of 2021. If you'd tell me that in less than 2 years, forget the people building their apps or their chains with HyperLane, there would be 4 or 5 different companies that are like betting their you know, their future basically on this thing and are making protocol contributions. And so that kind of makes the hub, you know, it's just, yeah, our team is not that big, but there are almost 5 teams that are like contributing to the protocol.
Yeah. Okay. 5 teams. And let me take my other question. We will try to go question, quick answer, question, quick answer, because I have a lot of stuff to ask you. If people in the chat want to ask question, feel free, for sure. So, can you introduce yourself a little, your background before HyperLane? Because you said you are not a developer yourself. What did you do before? You are in crypto like since 7 years, like me. What did you do all this time?
Oh man. Okay, where to start? So before I started HyperLane, I was an investor. Most recently, I ran the investment team. There's a firm called Galaxy. Some people might know. It's one of the larger investors in crypto.
Galaxy Digital.
So I ran the investment team there for a few years. Co-led it, but actually with my partner, Michael Jordan. He's since started.
You were in UK back in the time? In London?
No, actually, I was. This was mostly around New York and San Francisco.
Okay.
And you know, I did that for a few years. I joined there at like late 2019. Before that, I was the first hire at this firm called Passport Capital, which was a large macro hedge fund that had been around for about 20 years before wanting to get into crypto and started a crypto fund. I was the first person from the outside to join that. It was a good run. Before that, before crypto in general, I was a bond trader at Morgan Stanley.
Okay.
You know, like I grew up in Israel, like not from a wealthy family, and like somehow ended up at school at UC Berkeley. And at Berkeley was, you know, you were either an engineer and then you went to work at startups or big tech, or if you were on the economics or business side, you went to work to two places. You went to work for the Wall Street banks, or you went to work for the McKinseys of the world, you know, the consulting companies. And I had an offer from both, but Wall Street, honestly, like I needed money to help my parents pay their mortgage, and Wall Street was going to pay a little bit better, even though it was more intense. And I was like, fuck it, this is where I'm going. And right around the time where I started, I got really into crypto because a friend from school was like, hey, I'm going to put all my money into Ethereum. Like, what do you think? And I was like,
whoa.
I don't know.
I don't
like,
know.
Can I say that? I don't know. I was like, I don't know if it's a bad idea or a good idea. Like, he's asking me because I work for, I work with money.
Yeah.
I'm like a trader, so I should have an answer. And we spent that whole weekend, because this was like Saturday afternoon. We spent the next 48 hours basically just like learning about Ethereum, and I become like so crypto pilled. I go back to work Monday morning and I'm telling all the traders on the desk, I'm like, you guys have no idea. We're going to lose our jobs in the next few years. This thing is going to be huge. And they're like, you are insane. And for the next year, I just keep getting deeper and deeper and deeper into crypto. And they keep making more and more and more and more fun of me every time. Any chance they get, I'm like the crazy crypto guy. But some people there were nice enough and they said, hey, you know what? This big client of ours, Passport Cap, they're thinking about creating a crypto fund. You should talk to them. And 2 weeks later, so I met them right before Christmas in 2017. And then I joined as soon as the new year started. And it was a great place to be. That's how I got my first real opportunity in the industry.
So you joined at the top of the other bull cycle.
To the day. The day. My first day was the tippy top. That was the day where the article in the New York Times came out and it said, everyone's getting hilariously rich and you're not.
Yeah,
and
I remember that.
So yeah, it was to the day. Like,
okay,
could not have been worse, but it was a good ride.
Okay, so you were into investment, then Galaxy, and then now HyperLane from yourself. So is HyperLane accessible for anyone? Anyone can build on HyperLane? I mean, you just need to know a little technical stuff to code and get the document.
Yes, sorry. So I guess what I should say, it's HyperLane is accessible to anyone, but there's no limitation on this. But right, it is a developer product, and so to really use HyperLane to connect your app with other apps on other chains or your chain with other chains, you do need to know how to write software. HyperLane is primarily, it's written in the languages of the chains that it supports. So it's Solidity, it's, you can use like Rusty type languages for Solana and some of the other chains.
Okay.
So yeah, that is the one. It's to the extent that there is like a limitation on it, on who can use it. It is like you do need to be, you don't need to be an engineer technically, but you do need to have that skill set of knowing how to write software. But the product, for the most part, certainly if someone wanted to build a permissioned product using HyperLane's permissionless technology, they absolutely can, right? Like we can't stop anyone from doing that. But most products built with HyperLane, right? Like we recently launched like the bridging for a new rollup, and it's totally open. Anyone can use it.
Okay, that's nice. And you are mentioning Massa. So to give you a little background, I know very well the Massa team as a French guy for sure. We cover it on our media. Our media is investor in Massa right now. And I know they want a very decentralized layer one based on proof of stake, meaning that they have their own smart contract language, their own stuff. How much time did it take for them to propose HyperLane? Because you made a communication saying that Massa is now compatible with HyperLane.
Yeah, well, I don't know the exact, because they did most of the work themselves. But let me tell you, like, I love the Massa and HyperLane story. In fact, it might be, of the things that happened in the last few months, it might be my favorite. And you might ask, like, why is that? It's because that is exactly why we built HyperLane. Like, think about what I told the audience right off the bat, what I was talking. What's the takeaway from this conversation is HyperLane lets anyone connect any chain. That's when I say permissionless interoperability, like when you go on our site and it says it on the site, or when it says it on the shirts, that's really what it means. And a team like Massa, who is very talented, very confident team, right? They're still relatively unknown. They're an underdog. You know, you put a bet on them, we put a bet on them, but they're not like a household name just yet. And they're going to be, but they're not just yet. And so folks aren't lining up, right? Like the big players are not lining up to say, I'm going to change the direction of my engineering organization to build on Massa. I'm not, right? Like, because they do have a bespoke language, like you said. And so why was HyperLane a great choice for them? Because they can take this thing, they can rewrite it for their chain, and now they can connect it with anyone else, right? And by the time that other people get interested in them, they'll probably be big by then, right? Like HyperLane can help them as an underdog, you know, really build a strong community, bring assets over, bring liquidity over. Stuff where without HyperLane, there are other options where build something completely on their own without any guidance, without, you know, any tooling and all that, or wait and, you know, maybe pay a ton of money, or maybe like, you know, just have to wait until someone like Layer Zero and XLR can support them. And so the fact that they saw this, you know, I will tell you the honest truth. We did not spend, you know, this wasn't a case where we had to spend a ton of time to convince them. They were just like, oh, wow, this thing is very, very cool. How could it work for us? Can you explain it? So we get on a couple of phone calls. We told them how it works, how it will work in practice for them, what work needs to be done to convert it. We've shown them examples. Hey, here is how it's being built for Solana, for Move. Here's how these other teams are doing it. And within a few weeks, you know, they're doing it. And so, as far as I understand, by the time that Massa is live, it'll have interoperability powered by the version of HyperLane that they'll run themselves. And that to me is just the coolest thing in the world. Like, that's exactly why we did this. And the best part is, like, obviously I hope this doesn't happen, because like I like living and we have a great family, things are great, have a great team here. But like, if we all vanished, if everyone on the core team vanished, they could still do all of this, and they don't have any dependency on us. And that, you know, you said they wanted to be decentralized. Like, this is the biggest example of it, because in fact they could actually come, you know, they could bring in HyperLane into their base chain in such a way that if you're validating for Massa, you're also securing the interoperability channel.
The relay.
But that's, you know,
yeah, we will talk about it.
Yeah, that's if that's kind of onto you know, their choice if they wanted to do that, but they have that option. Sorry, I know I'm getting excited, but I think it's just a cool story, one that I like to tell.
Okay, I will keep an eye on the chat. I cut it now, then we have bigger camera. So I want to ask, what is your business model? Because you talk about interoperability, we talked about IBC. IBC, you do not pay any fee to transport something from a chain A to chain B, but it's on Cosmos. When you use Layer 0 or XLR, you pay something. What about HyperLane? What is your business model? Do you plan to issue a token yourself?
Great questions. So let's start with the business one. There are two aspects. There's the business model that this company, one of the companies that works on HyperLane, has. And then there is a business model that the protocol might have. So let's start with the company. We've built this protocol. You know, now we are just one of the several teams that is advancing it and building with it. We built HyperLane to be as open as possible, but in the same way that, like, yeah, anyone can go ahead and run servers when they want to create a new internet company. But a lot of them prefer to use the cloud. So what we're doing is we are offering services for people who want to use HyperLane. So, hey, do you want to launch it on your chain, but you don't feel like running the validator, running the relay, or doing any of that? We will offer you those services. That's something we've started doing recently. Have a few roll-up clients that are interested, maybe some of the roll-up as a service clientele as well. So that's the business model for this company. Then we have the protocol, right? Like, what does it do? And so with our upcoming version change to V3, there's the possibility of charging protocol fees. Now, here's the thing with HyperLane. It's always going to be the case, because it's totally permissionless and totally open source, anyone will be able to always deploy their own mailboxes, and those don't have to have any fees associated with them. Now, I want to separate. There are gas fees that are born because of the actions that the protocol takes, like, there's certain computation that happens on chain that happen when you use HyperLane. In that regard, still, at least in EVM land, HyperLane is one of the more gas efficient ones, significantly cheaper than some of the other players. But beyond that, the protocol, and especially protocol governance, might want to have some type of fee. So what is based on like our conversations now, it seems like those will look something like a small addition on the gas paid in general. So say like you have a transaction, and that transaction costs, say, 100,000 units of gas, which on Ethereum could be anywhere from like, some amount of cents to a couple bucks, depending on the gas price. The HyperLane protocol fee would add something like 0.5% on that gas fee. So if you were, say, paying $2, now you'd pay $2.01. And now the hope is that there's so much traffic that these tiny, tiny fees add up. And so that would be the protocol's business model. Now, you asked, what about a token? There's nothing guaranteed yet. There's nothing kind of set in stone. But certainly, that's been a discussion. And a number of the companies that are working on the protocol are very interested in going this direction. And we certainly have some ideas as well. So things are being moved around. They're being examined. I think personally that a model here could be very exciting and could help turn users of both the end users, but also the developers that are building with it, into owners. And I think developer platforms that are owned by their users is like, this is why I'm in crypto.
Yeah, I agree.
This is something that in the 6 years I've been in, I've tried to move in that direction with companies I've worked with, and now being in this position, something I'd like to see done here. But no dictators here, so we have to consider a bunch of opinions. So no guarantees, but certainly it's something that is being talked about, and there's a chance it happens.
I have a nice message in the chat. I will create the next Tornado Cash. So it's funny, but at the same time, let's say the next Tornado Cash is a roll-up and is bridged to HyperLane. What does that mean to HyperLane? From your point of view, because you are not God, you cannot.
Yeah. It is what it is, I think it's cool. I think it would be cool that someone is able to do that. Now, what I'll say, unfortunately, despite GBL's ambition here, I certainly hope you also don't go to prison, but we've seen what Western governments are interested in doing. And so I imagine they will still, despite you using kind of like a decentralized and permissionless protocol to do that, I do think they will try to, if you violate what the things they say are, hey, don't do those, I think they will still try to exact their pressure on you. But from our perspective, right, like I said, HyperLane's been open sourced basically since the inception, before it even had anything to do, and it really is just software. And so like there's nothing we could do to stop you know, like at most say, hey, if we were running, you know, one thing I can say is we probably won't be running relayers for that rollup. So like if that rollup wanted to contract our services, I'm afraid we would have to refuse, because probably like it would put our company in material jeopardy. And like,
Yeah.
I love crypto and I love decentralization, but I'll be very honest, you know what I love more? I love my daughter more than anything in the world. She's like nothing means more to me in the whole world than her. And like,
I see.
I'm not gonna lose that to but the things we built let anyone do that themselves, right? So that rollup, they could run relayers on themselves, and they could do everything without us. They'll never have to depend on us. And if they want to take that risk for themselves, like, I'm not going to tell nobody to stop, right? Like, I got into crypto from a standpoint of we need to be able to have our freedoms and our sovereignty. And so that's why we built HyperLane in this way.
Yeah, and I think it's time now to show us your screen and how it works, because we discussed about relayers. So thank you for this message, Ibial. I think it's very interesting to understand
very
concept of relaying, because it means that there is a point A, a point B, and someone in between who relays the message. So can you explain us a little what is a relayer, all of that work?
Of course. So let me see. Okay. All right. So hopefully y'all can see the screen.
We'll see the screen well.
This is a diagram that shows the high level of like, how does HyperLane work? How does something that you send from any chain, let's call it chain A or the origin chain, how does that get all the way to chain B? And what happens in the middle? So I have a sending contract here. That is whatever you would be using to both compose, or write that message. And then you deliver it to what we call the HyperLane mailbox. Earlier, when I was saying anyone can put HyperLane on any chain, there are three components to that: the mailbox contract and the other associated HyperLane contracts. Those are the things that send and receive messages between chains. That has to be on any chain that you want to communicate between using HyperLane. A second thing you need is one of these three here, either a validator setup or a sort of watchtower setup, or one of these interchain security modules, where you need to have something that's securing these messages. It could be anything, as long as you're comfortable with it and as long as you think your users will use it, but it needs to be something.
One of them, so you said, first, or all of them, but at least one of them.
No, just at least one of them, right? Okay. And so like that one of them could be, again, as simple as like you just run it yourself and it's kind of like a one of one. And it could be as robust as, a massive validator set, or a zero knowledge based scheme, or an optimistic scheme. HyperLane, I'll go into a little bit more detail after this, but HyperLane is kind of open to all of those, but at least one needs to be set. There is actually a new thing that we're doing for people to experiment, where it's a security setting we're calling the no security setting, but that still needs to be set too. So even if it's like nothing, that nothing needs to be set. And the third and final thing is the relayer. The relayer is a role that anyone can play for any set of chains. It's like an off-chain bot. And what does it really do is it looks at a mailbox on one chain that you tell it to look at. It looks on, it basically looks at the mailboxes that you tell it to pay attention to. And then when it sees your message and it sees that it has, that it's been secured by one or more of these security modules, it reads it, it sees where it needs to go, and then it delivers it to its destination chain. And that's really what relaying is. So again, anyone can run a relayer for their own transactions. That's what makes HyperLane kind of special, in a sense that as long as you're willing to do it, you don't have to depend on anybody else. And what a relayer does in terms of functionality that is really nice is, well, if I'm going to be sending transactions from Massa to ETH, I don't want to have to, require myself to own Ethereum to pay gas before I even send my first transaction, right? I'd much rather pay in the native currency of the chain I'm sending something from.
Mm.
And so that's something that the relayer handles. The relayer, think of them as a little bit like the gas market maker, like the gas inventory manager. And they will charge you on chain A in the currency of chain B. So you don't have, like, if you're on Massa, you'll just pay in Massa tokens and you won't need to have ETH, and vice versa. If you're on ETH and you're going to Massa, you won't need to have Massa tokens. You'll just have, you'll just pay for it in ETH. So that's the high level of how that works. And relaying, again, is this really important topic, because you can either use a relayer that's run by the chain itself. You could use a relayer that's run by the app. We're even think we will see sort of like a marketplace of relayers. There's been a lot of talk of intents. People love saying that word, and they're like, this intent, I'll express these intents. And to me, you have this, talk of solvers in intent world, but really all the solvers are, they're relayers with a mission, where their mission is a little bit more complex than, hey, take John's message from A and process it on B. It's, hey, John has ETH on A and he wants to end up with Massa on B. Make sure it happens for them. So I very much think that there could be a marketplace here instead of just one relayer, say a group of them. And ultimately this looking very much like a cross-chain intent-based thing, where your message says what you want to achieve, and then the relayer handles that for you, and you end up with it without having to do any trouble.
So what do you explain is the biggest issue can be security. In a way, we have to make sure that they don't do shit with their own security, but you can help the issue of liquidity between roll-up, this kind of stuff, because you can transfer your assets, can be NFT, it can be tokens, whatever, from a chain A to chain B. So from a rollup A to rollup B, from a Starknet to ZK Sync to whatever, is they all implement HyperLane.
Yes. Now, the one thing I should cover, but was a mistake of mine for not getting into. The nice thing about the relayer can't mess with the contents of what you're sending. They're getting a sort of assigned message, and they can't, if they were to change anything with it, that signature would no longer work. So you don't have to trust them to be good. You just have to trust that they're, going to, ultimately like do the thing that you ask them to do. And if they don't, you could do it yourself. So it's very similar to how, when we send the transaction on Ethereum, we're kind of hoping the miners are going to take care of it. None of them have to. Nothing is going to happen to them if they don't. But they like money. And so we put a little money in there, and they go and they do it. So the HyperLane relayer is the same. Where security comes in is with those security modules. And the relayer, it doesn't think about them too much. It just knows, wait a second, John sent this message, and this is the security for it. And so I'm just passing it along. The relayer is really just like a messenger. It doesn't do any heavy lifting beyond the messenger part and like handling your gas tokens. If the security module is bad, then whatever, the relayer is going to give you bad stuff. But it's not like the relayer itself. It can't really be bad. It could just be, it could be bad at its job, but it can't be like a bad person. You can have a relayer that like hates money and is like, hey, you know what? There's all these people here who want to pay, but I'm like, fuck this. I'm not going to work today. So sort of like how, if a miner didn't want to process transactions, then
someone else will.
They're just not earning.
Yeah.
They're just not earning, right? So like someone else will, and so that we view that same thing with relayers.
So can you resume very quickly which blockchains or cryptocurrency are currently integrated, and what do we expect? What are the next chain coming?
Ooh, great question. I like that one. So right now, there are core versions of HyperLane, meaning it's been looked at. It's been, there's testing around it. There's monitoring around it, and it involves like a validator set that the core team has helped assemble on 10 chains, including pretty much every major EVM chain and Solana. So it's on ETH, Arbitrum, Optimism, Avalanche, Binance, Celo, Polygon, and recently launched on Solana. This is in the last like 3 weeks. There are also more than 10 other, permissionless deployments of HyperLane on a bunch of other EVM chains. And soon there will be other, like when Massa is live, those will exist as well. Now, some of the ones that are coming fairly soon that I'm pretty excited about are Osmosis, which was recently announced. So as soon as the work so right now, HyperLane, the COSM-WASM version of HyperLane is going into audit. After that, if there's any changes, then so I'm hoping that as early as in the next 6 weeks, HyperLane will be on Osmosis. That would be terrific. And yeah, there's a few others, but I'll save that for the excitement. But like the Osmosis and a set of other like Cosmos leaders, some haven't announced yet, but will quite soon. And in terms of like actual currencies, the cool thing about HyperLane is that it can accept any asset you throw into it. But there are also some direct integrations. So, people are very familiar with USDC. Circle has created what they call CCTP, which is like the cross-chain transfer protocol. It lets you move USDC, kind of like teleport it between chains, wherever it exists. And so HyperLane is directly integrated into CCTP.
Okay.
So if you want to say, like, if you have, if Circle has put CCTP on your chain and HyperLane is on it, now you can use that to move USDC around. But beyond that, there are a number of new assets that we expect to launch. As with HyperLane, we have this concept of like the interchain token. It's similar if you're familiar with like Layer Zero's OFT. And basically, it's just an asset where instead of, it doesn't need to be bridged. You'd say, hey, I want it to be able to move between Massa, Ethereum, and Arbitrum. And then when I send it to you, I put in your address, but I also say, hey, this is the Massa address. This is the Arbitrum address. And it gets burned from my wallet, and then it gets minted in your wallet on the new chain.
Okay, very good. And did you try to get in contact with EOS, Ultra, Wax, all this kind of EOS forked chain, or not yet?
You know what? We did try. Unsuccessfully.
Okay.
So it's something we're still interested in.
Okay. I know a French-speaking guy in the EOS Foundation.
Very
Yvan
good.
Larose, yeah. I'm also working with Ultra, which is a fork EOS chain. They completely rebuilt, but it's based on EOS. And they plan to integrate IBC because EOS will integrate IBC. No, they integrate IBC in the last Antelope update. And I gave a contact, a Tezos contact to Feliz too. So if you want to try to work with Tezos, I know people there.
I would love both of those. I will hit you up after this.
Yeah. So that's very nice because you kind of solve interoperability issue, which is one of the biggest issue right now. Now, I hope we will not see big security issue because that's always the problem with bridging.
You and me both.
That's the issue, but that's nice. And you said you will integrate new chain. You didn't say the name, but I will say it for you. 3 and Aptos for sure, because you need to be in the Move ecosystem. Plus Near Protocol.
You said it, not me.
Near Protocol for sure. Let me check the top 100. The top 100 layer ones.
And
Polkadot.
One of the cooler things is, like I said, people are adding it on chains we never even thought of, right? So there's a chain called the Star, which is quite large in Japan.
Star? Okay.
And, we weren't familiar with it before. This team that we were working with wanted to be on it. They wanted to have a connection between Ethereum, Moonbeam, and this and a Star.
A Star, okay.
And so, and they put HyperLane on it. Yeah, exactly. They put HyperLane on it themselves.
So you will work with Sony soon, I think.
Yeah, so there's always chains that HyperLane is being added to that like we don't even know about.
Yeah.
Because someone is just using it because they have a specific need and they don't want to depend on anybody else.
That's very nice. Because once again, it's not like you need to go to HyperLane, you just check the documentation, which was the biggest issue with XLR and Layer 0. Even if Layer 0, they didn't issue their token yet, Layer 0. They will, but they didn't.
Yeah, I imagine they have got to at some point, right? They've hinted at it so many times, but...
because it will be your biggest competitor. We are all in the same ecosystem, but I mean...
no doubt, yeah. Yeah, they're a great bunch. They've done some really cool things, but it's a tight ecosystem.
So what is your primary goal right now as HyperLane for the protocol and the growth of the ecosystem?
Primary for us is, when we went with this permissionless design, that was because we felt this is the thing that can cover this expanding landscape of chains, because we felt that the amount of chains is going to grow faster than any single team can keep up with. So the goal for the next year is really twofold. Is, practically it's see HyperLane expand to as many chains and new languages and environments as possible. But to do that, we also need to make HyperLane easier to use, easier to work with. And so that, there's the practical goal, that hey, this is a goal for everyone working on the protocol. And then there's, what's the actual, what do we have to do to make that happen? I think we have to continue to make it more accessible. And those are the two biggest ones. And I'd be very happy if we hit them.
I see. So I will just speak in French very briefly, because I see a lot of people have issue with English. Donc, les gars, je vois qu'il y a beaucoup de gens qui ont des difficultés à comprendre, ce que je comprends parce que d'une, c'est en anglais, de deux, c'est technique. Donc, ce que je vais essayer de faire sous peu, c'est... je vais pas m'amuser à retraduire absolument tout de cette interview. Il devrait y avoir une traduction à peu près correcte qui va être faite automatiquement. J'aurai un outil pour ça. Par contre, ce que je vais faire, c'est que je vais probablement joindre en description un article qui résume un peu tout ce qu'on a dit pour récupérer les main concepts. On a parlé de décentralisation, de comment ça fonctionnait, de comment se brancher, reprendre tous ces concepts clés et les mettre dans un article. Et je proposerai l'article en même temps que la vidéo. Comme ça, vous comprendrez tout si jamais vous avez un souci en anglais. I switch back to English. So I said I think I will do a quick recap of what we said in an article on Coin Academy for the French-speaking people, because it's in English. I was sure they will have issue with English, but I didn't know they were that far from English speaking. And also it's technical. It's technical, so they don't get the point.
Yeah, technical art could be a bit harder, but they're interested.
Yeah.
One of our best team members, Fazila, is who you met first, is a native French speaker. So maybe I'll put it on her plate to do this.
Okay. But it will be quick because now we have artificial intelligence to help us.
Oh, that's right. I know. It's like, we're going to give this person this job. But actually, no, just chat GPT.
Yeah. And yeah, that's very cool. So what is the next step now? How can we follow HyperLane? How can we be part of?
Of course. So best way to do that, as this is especially right, if you want to stay up to date with all the news, you want to make sure that you're included, that you don't miss out anything. On Twitter, I know some people like calling it X now. I'm old. I'm just going to keep calling it Twitter. It's HyperLane_XYZ. I can share
put it in the description.
The link. Oh, perfect. And our Discord. Our Discord is really fun. It's not as hectic yet because there's not as many people asking when token. There's just a group of people who are building with it, a group of people who are excited about it. So it's pretty intimate. It's less than 10,000 people. It's a lot of fun. Me and the rest of the team are very active in it. So chime in anytime.
Yeah. Okay. So Twitter and Discord mostly. Thank you very much, Jon.
Absolutely.
I think we will keep it this way. Less than 1 hour. We get all the information we wanted because you explained the main concept. I will also put the documentation because Fazila sent me the documentation back in the time, and I think it can be very useful for people to understand how it works. Even if you are not a developer, it explains well all the concepts. I hope you will integrate more chain soon. and maybe some stuff about NFT, because I think the NFT market can love
Most definitely.
the protocol.
Yeah, we actually have a few NFT focused rollups that are going to be coming online the next few months.
Okay, so I see immutable X, this kind of stuff.
Yeah, love it. Thanks for having me. This was a wonderful time, and happy to come on any other.
Sure. Thank you for your time, John, and have a good night, because it starts to be a little late. I switch back to French. Les gars, j'espère que vous avez aimé en tout cas. Je vous laisse le résumé en description du coup de cette petite interview, en espérant que ça puisse vous aider à mieux comprendre le concept. On est sur, non pas un bridge, mais un protocole qui vient faire concurrence directement à du XLR et du layer 0, mais de façon beaucoup plus permissionless. Donc ça se traduit simplement par décentralisé. C'est pas tu vas les voir et tu pries pour être intégré ou tu payes pour être intégré. C'est tu te sers dans la doc et tu intègres et tu gères ta propre sécurité. Et puis voilà. Donc en fait, c'est assez simple à comprendre. C'est juste que tu choisis ton niveau de sécurité. Tu peux avoir une option ou plusieurs. C'est toi qui gères ta sécurité et c'est toi qui gères ce que tu envoies et ce que tu reçois comme message. Voilà. Si ça vous a plu en tout cas, petit like, petit commentaire en description. On se dit à très vite sur la chaîne. N'hésitez pas à vous abonner. Ciao tout le monde. Thank you, John.
Thank you, everyone. This was a pleasure.
Bye.